Daniels, quick throw, far side, get it out there to McLaurin. Breaks through, Terry McLaurin, foot race, McLaurin is gonna win! Touchdown, Washington!
Oh my God. That seems like so long ago now. Second quarter, January 17th, 2025, divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Washington as a 6 seed after upsetting Tampa in the first round on the road against the 1 seed. And Terry McLaurin on a bubble takes it 58 yards. Washington regains the lead and never gives it up. That gave them a 17-14 lead. As we know, they went on to score 31 in the first half and win the game 45-31. The rematch, which we all saw when the schedule came out in April, is Sunday. It doesn't have quite the meaning that we hoped it would have. May be meaningful for Detroit, that is for sure. Good morning, everybody. It is a Friday football show. Lots to get to on the show. We will detour for a moment during this show for me to talk about tonight's Maryland-Georgetown game in College Park and the renewal of, and I say renewal, it's barely been a played on the floor rivalry, but it looks like both Ed Cooley and Buzz Williams are ready to take this thing to a level in which basketball fans in this area have wanted for a long time. So I'll take a look back a bit at Georgetown and Maryland and talk about the significance of tonight's game in College Park. By the way, 6 o'clock tip, 5:30 pregame right here on your home for Maryland basketball. Johnny and Naki will be on the call. Naki will join us at 11 a.m. This morning to talk about the game. Ben at 12, by the way. So I went back and I pulled up my notes after the Detroit playoff game. All right. And I just want to read some of those notes. These were the notes that I had for the show following the win over Detroit, which was honestly, I think, the most thrilling win for the franchise in 34 years at that point. And in my notes, I said, we had a chance to experience something together that we had not experienced in over 3 decades. We were institutionalized essentially for 25 years under Dan Snyder. And we always kind of expected the worst. And we never were disappointed expecting the worst. And then this, long-awaited moment happened and we all experienced it together. I mean, it was really a stunning performance. And I wrote in my notes and I said, look, the win should be number one on my list. But what's number one on my list really is I can't get over how good Jayden Daniels was in the game and is. And I wrote that I think right now, other than Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, he's the best quarterback in the league right now. Look, it was not crazy to say that. He had played 2 incredible playoff games. And the performance on that night in the first half was all time. And I wrote, we knew Detroit's defense wasn't good. It was injured. But still, come on. On the road against the 1 seed, he went in and dominated. He threw for 242 yards in the first half. They scored 31, 28 in the second quarter. He accounted for 271 yards himself in the first half. In the first half of a playoff game on the road. And they did not punt once. And the only time they got stopped is when they took the ball out of his hands. Remember on the 4th and 1 when they put Mariota in the game? Because they ended up having, a sizable lead, he was 22 of 31 for 299, 2 touchdowns, and had the one big one, the deep one that Diami dropped on their second drive of the game. He would have thrown for 350. He rushed for 51 yards, so his total, accounting of yardage was 350 for the game, but 271 and a half. It was insane. It was an insane individual performance, which had followed an unbelievable performance the week before in a game in which they needed him to, make one clutch play after another in the fourth quarter. And this is what I really wanted to get to. This is what I wrote in my notes for the show that followed. Every week we've been talking about, is it too early? Is it too early? Is it too early to call him an elite quarterback? Is it too early to call him one of the top 5 QBs in the game right now? Is it too early to say that you wouldn't trade him for any other quarterback in the league not named Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, or Burrow? Is it too early to say he's having the greatest season a quarterback has ever had in this franchise's history? Well, at that point, it wasn't too early anymore. It was the greatest rookie season of all time. The numbers said it. The wins said it. He became just the 4th rookie quarterback to win multiple playoff games. Flacco, Sanchez, and Purdy were the others. And I wrote down, they had a supporting cast. They had and were led by defenses or running games or both, not the quarterback. Different here. 12 regular season wins, 2 more in the postseason, all quarterback led. 6th rookie quarterback to make the championship game. Flacco, Sanchez, Purdy, Sean King, and Ben Roethlisberger. But again, the only one to do it leading the team as the reason the team. And I wrote down, if he wins next week in Philadelphia, or if he wins next week, against Philadelphia or the Rams, he'll become the first rookie quarterback to win a conference championship game ever and get to a Super Bowl. And my last note was, I just can't believe how one player can elevate a team this much. That was 10 months ago, basically. And here we are. We're in a much different spot. Now, you know how I feel. I don't think we're in a much better spot with him, in a much worse spot with him, much different spot with him. I don't. I think the context around this season has really, look, he's played in 5.5 games. 5.5 games. That's what he's played in. Now, we did get some news this morning. Some good news from John Keim. Let me read the tweet. Sorry. I thought I had that up on my Keim about 35 minutes ago tweeted, Jayden Daniels won't need surgery per source. Had heard Monday there was good news about Daniels' surgery, but they wanted to run more tests to make sure. Heard he's just feeling a little sore. This is why he wasn't placed on IR. What's this mean going forward? Don't know yet. That from Keim 35 minutes ago about Jayden. So, I suggested the other day that it was more likely than not season ending, not serious, not, an injured reserve, that he's going to be ready to play football again this year. I believe that. I was 3 to 4 weeks in that area, 3 to 5 weeks, something like that. Again, if you're crazy like I am sometimes, and you start saying to yourself, these NFL seasons, they're nuts. I mean, Minnesota last week is a 9-point underdog on the road, won. Carolina is a 14-point underdog at Lambeau, won. Last night, the Raiders, who stink. By the way, I'm so blanking pissed. I want the Raiders all week. I was going to give out the Raiders and the under, and then I said this to you guys on the air yesterday. Strong lean on the Raiders and the under. Also, Georgia Southern and UTSA, those two split. Georgia Southern won outright against App State, and UTSA got smoked by South Florida. By the way, that South Florida team, Max, I'm telling you right now, if they end up being the non-power 4 to make it into the playoff, they're dangerous.
You might get a win, Kevin.
They are dangerous. They are, when you are a Florida school in football and you just the leftovers that don't go everywhere else, you're still
set,
talent.
Man.
You still have, you're loaded. Anyway, the Raiders could have won that game easily. They missed a field goal to tie late. I mean, that was ugly football last night.
If Gino's knee didn't explode, I think maybe there would have been a bit of a better chance, but
it didn't explode. It was a quad, right? Didn't it turn out to be a quad?
Something like that. But
yeah.
If you saw him limping into the locker room after the game, it was
Yeah.
Not a pretty sight.
No, it wasn't. I get, he is a bit of a gamer. I've always enjoyed that about him. Far from way up there on the list of good ones, but he is a gamer and he's unafraid, as a thrower. The Raiders are truly limited. They traded away Jacoby Myers. By the way, Tyler Lockett's in that lineup now. We could have used him and Kendrick Bourne. Like, it would have been nice to have, snagged those two along the way. Would have been, a bit of a difference maker for sure. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get to in the next segment just keys to a win over Detroit. And I spent some time last night watching some recent Detroit games. Last week, I told you this is a mismatch against Seattle. I don't feel as much about, Detroit as I did about Seattle, but man, they're much better on defense than I thought they were. They are much better on defense than I thought they were. God, they've got talent on defense. Thank God we didn't have to face a healthy Detroit team in that postseason game last January. But man, that game, that's the game, of the last, once the glory years ended and once they were far enough in the rear view and the, reign of terror started with Dan Snyder, that was the game we waited for. I mean, that's the one. I can tell you this, for my boys, that's the game. That's the one in which the euphoria, the celebration, the stunning, shocking nature of it, because we were a big underdog in that game against the 1 seed. The fact that they were, moving on to an NFC title game. They were in the Final Four of the NFL playoffs. Like, nobody under the age of, 40 legitimately had ever experienced anything like that. The prominent spot, Saturday night divisional round playoff game on the road in front of the most hostile of crowds. The Tampa game, a lot of Washington fans made their way into Tampa, into Raymond James. Not at Ford Field. That was dominated by Lions fans. During that quarterback Netflix series over the summer, Jared Goff and his wife, lovely, they had a lot of the shots of the wife and the other players' wives and families in a couple of the boxes, and they were shocked at what Jayden Daniels was doing to them. Shocked. Look, some of what happened in that game was self-inflicted. All of the turnovers, the defense finally got some takeaways, and they made him pay. But what they were doing on offense was just insane. I mean, Detroit couldn't stop them. They had no prayer, except when they took the ball out of Jayden's hands and gave it to Mariota on 4th down on the opening drive. Other than that, it was just touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. And then they had the Quan Martin, pick, which set up the score. Huge, massive, couple of big, missed calls in the games, but, ultimately they couldn't stop us. They turned it over 5 times. The play at the end of the half by Sanders still. That's the game, man. That's the game post-glory years. There aren't a lot to choose from. Not a lot to choose from. The Monday Night Miracle in 2005, Brunel to Santana Moss twice. The Sean Taylor picking up the fumble and scoring against the Eagles to clinch the playoff spot New Year's Day later on in that year. The playoff win, the last playoff win they had before they beat Tampa last year against Tampa, in 2005, with Sean getting tossed but being a big part of the game early on. There just wasn't much to choose from, and the games that were memorable were games in which they were regular season games, and sometimes they were regular season games in seasons that didn't even produce a playoff win. Like the, Troy Vincent blocked field goal that Sean Taylor picked up, ran around, got face masked before Nick Novak came out and kicked a game-winning field goal to beat the Cowboys 22-19 during the regular season. But they were, it was a terrible season. It was 5-11, 6-10, whatever it was in 2006. I mean, the Tampa game was thrilling enough with the doinked field goal by Gonzalez at the end. By the way, Gonzalez got signed by somebody this week. Zane Gonzalez.
He sure did. You'll find out when we go around the NFL later today.
Oh, I got to wait until then?
Yeah, you do. And the listeners, too.
Is it Atlanta?
No, yes.
It's Atlanta, right?
It
yeah,
is,
because
yeah.
they got rid of the guy that missed the extra point against
The
the
Patriots sleeper agent, John Parker Romo, yes.
Yeah. Remember Gonzalez with the OCD?
Oh,
my
yeah.
God. That was nuts.
Messing with his hair constantly, just
the helmet on, off, rubbing the hair, the whole thing.
I get it.
I mean,
it's weird.
What was weird is I came in the next day and I said, he's got to have OCD, right? And then the story came out later that week about his battles, real battles with obsessive compulsive disorder, which I know many of you listening are familiar with it. If it's not you, it's somebody you know. Not pretty.
I will say, when you put on that helmet and the hair gets weird and it's pulling on it, you don't want it. So I understand where he's coming from with all the fixing.
Yeah, but he had it going. Remember on the sideline.
I remember. Yeah,
it was that game. That game was the game. I mean, the Cincinnati moment early in the season was certainly a moment. The Philly game, the Hail Mary, obviously, but no, the whole season was obviously magical. It was a magical ride. But in terms of significance, going into Detroit as a 6 seed and an 8.5, 9-point dog and beating the snot out of the Lions in a playoff game, that was thrilling. And, there was no other takeaway other than, oh my God, number 5. Are you kidding me? This just doesn't happen in the NFL. It doesn't happen. And here we are. Here we are 10 months later. And some of you, I wouldn't say the majority of you, but, a sizable part of the crowd believes they got it wrong with him. Good news, though, on the injury with him that Kime's pointing out. Thank goodness. And I think we kind of all had an inkling it was going to end up being something resembling what John tweeted out. And, we'll find out what the time frame is, and they play 3 games over the next 4 weeks. They do have their bye week after Miami. I'm going to tell you right now, somehow they pulled off a stunner on Sunday. We're going to start looking at, some scenarios. We will, if they pull it off. I think it's going to be really hard to pull it off. I'll give you my keys to what would be a big upset Sunday against the Lions when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app.
With Jayden not on IR, what's the update on him? What with the plan for him?
Yep, we are actually going through a final medical meeting today regarding second opinions and that to put the plan together. So we should have an update for you here, the next day or so. Just being thorough through the whole process, like all the guys, to make sure all the opinions and then gather all the info and then make the decisions from there.
So we do have news. That was from the other day. The news is, and I read you John's tweet, John Keim's tweet. Ben, rather good news on Jayden Daniels' elbow injury front. Tests show no ligament damage, which means no surgery. He avoids IR, at least for now. Whether Daniels plays again this season, TBD. I think he's going to play again this season. I mean, if he's not ready for another 2, 3, 4 weeks, let's just say you come off the bye and he's still not ready Thanksgiving weekend, but going into December with that first game at Minnesota, they could be very easily 3-9 at that point. They could be. Can they win one of these next 3 games and be 4-8 with 5 games to go? I just don't know how you sit a second-year quarterback who's played 5.5 games, and you've got the whole month of December, you've got 5 games left. I don't know how you do that. We'll deal with that when we get to it. All right. Washington and Detroit on Sunday, 4:25 in Landover. By the way, that line keeps coming down, boys and girls. I see 7.5s and 8s now. This thing was at 9.5 the other day. What does that mean? It means there's a lot of sharp money on Washington. We talked about this yesterday. Why would there be sharp money on Washington? Well, Detroit really got beat up on Sunday by Minnesota. Minnesota's much better than Washington talent-wise, defensively in particular, and better schemed. Brian Flores is first rate as a defensive coordinator. But we had Dan Miller, the longtime play-by-play voice of the Lions, on the show the other day, and he said that, they're banged up along the offensive line. They could be missing multiple pieces, and that really hurt Goff, Sunday against a team that really got after him. He didn't throw the ball well. They forced him into a lot of difficult situations. Can Washington, against a banged-up offensive line, generate a pass rush with their banged-up defense? Probably not. But maybe they don't get torched like they did last week. By the way, a friend of mine said, Sheehan, talking about Jayden's playoff game against Detroit, 271 yards of offense in the first half. Remember, Sam Darnold threw for 330 in the first half. Yes, he did. He did. It was not a playoff game, though. And it was against truly a horrible, horrible defensive football team. But Detroit was not a good defensive football team when Washington arrived at Ford Field last January. The lines come down. I think it's Detroit injuries. I think when you come off a game like the one they came off of, where it was physically very much a beatdown, that next week road game, maybe they're overlooking Washington at this point. Maybe, Dan Miller suggested the other day there's not a real revenge factor. They don't feel that. And, if Washington had been good and this would have been a highlighted game, which it was going to be, but now the Rams 49ers in that 4:25 slot is the highlighted game. But anyway, I can tell you right now, Washington's going to be a smell test selection. Detroit is the most publicly bet team of the football weekend across the board, and yet there's sharp money on Washington. That is a formula for me to go with the dog. So last week I came in here on Friday and I said, wow, I can't believe how good Seattle is. Like, they are really, really good. This is actually a really, really bad matchup. Now, I had the wishful, Jayden's back. Jayden can play. He can do this. We're desperate. Yeah, didn't really matter. This isn't a great matchup for Washington, that's for sure. Not a good matchup at all. I don't think it's quite the matchup last week was, believe it or not, because of Detroit being banged up in their offensive line. But what really stuck out to me as I watched some of Detroit's recent games, even the games in which they've given up some points, to Minnesota and to Kansas City, I think they're really good on defense. I didn't realize this until after I watched a couple of games and I looked it up on DVOA. Right now, they're the third-ranked defense in the NFL per the DVOA metric, behind Houston and guess who? Seattle. Just barely ahead of Denver, the Rams, and Cleveland. They're excellent on defense. Aiden Hutchinson is that guy. In talking to Dan Miller the other day, I asked him, I said, do you guys put him in the TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons class? And he said something that I totally agree with. I think we have to take Myles Garrett out of that conversation. He is at a level that no one else is. He is so far and away the best defensive player in football. And one of the greatest defensive players of this generation, to go along with Aaron Donald, I would say. Myles Garrett, by the way, lock Hall of Famer, first ballot, no matter how bad the teams he played on were. He's just that guy. He's that good. But he said, Dan Miller did, he said, but you definitely have to include him in the Parsons and the TJ Watt, et cetera, category. I agree with that. Aiden Hutchinson got hurt last year. Remember, early in the year, they missed him all year long. He is an absolute terror, drawing penalties, getting sacks. You have to double him. I don't know how, Tunsil and wherever it is, this is a really tough matchup, but there are other stars on their defense. Brian Branch is a star. The second-round pick from Alabama a few years back. He is a star at safety. They don't have Kirby Joseph because truly their safeties as a combo when they're healthy, maybe the best combo in the NFL. Jack Campbell, remember when he got picked in the 23 draft, middle of the first round out of Iowa as a linebacker, and they had already picked Jahmyr Gibbs, and people said, what are the Lions doing? You don't take running backs and linebackers in the first round. Well, Jahmyr Gibbs is a star, and Jack Campbell is really, really good. Okay, number 46 is a tackling machine. You cannot stay on him. I just think that I was blown away with how much better they were on defense than I thought they were. By the way, they're fast on defense. They're physical. They are aggressive on defense. They play a lot of man coverage. I mean, it looks like to me, I didn't look up the numbers, I should have, but it looks to me like they basically play man coverage and they rely on their guys to get to the quarterback. We don't have anybody that can beat man coverage. Like last week, it's not hard to see what Minnesota was doing in watching the game. It's like, okay, we understand that they're coming after J.J. McCarthy. We understand that they're going to be playing man coverage across. But we have Justin Jefferson. We have Jordan Addison. We can put the ball up for grabs and let them win one-on-one. This would actually be a game in which if Terry were here, he's such a good contested catch guy, and you give him opportunities in man coverage. You give him the opportunities, and if he can win and he can pull it down and get a couple of big plays, you're off and running. But yeah, I mean, Minnesota, McCarthy only threw for 143 yards, but Jefferson had 6 for 47, including a touchdown in man coverage against zero blitz. And it was on his outside, shoulder. Really good throw by McCarthy. He pulled it in almost with one hand. It was a great catch. And here's the other thing they did, and I'm going to get to my keys in a moment. They ran the football. I mean, Mason and Jones, 19 carries for 114 yards. So they were well over 5 yards per carry. So I think that this is where we start. Overall, by the way, Detroit's, got really good turnover margin. They've got 12 takeaways on the year. They're ball hawks. This is a defensive team that's plays differently than the team they played on Sunday night, but talent-wise is really good. And then, of course, we know what they have offensively, right? With, obviously Amon-Ra, who is an elite-level receiver, Jamison Williams, who is an absolute burner, and then their backs in Gibbs and Montgomery. I mean, Gibbs, I still maintain that as great as Washington was in that game, they would have avoided a lot of those turnovers if they just handed the ball off to Jahmyr Gibbs against Washington's defense last year. He averaged 10 yards per carry in the first half, and he only got 14 carries. It was the first game back, remember, for David Montgomery, and they felt compelled to give him a bunch of carries, which I think was a mistake. All right. Number one, Washington pulls off the upset if they run the football. Detroit's excellent against the run. They're 13th against the run. They're just excellent defensively. But with Mariota and with, the kind of team Washington has where the quarterback can be involved in the run game, key number one, run the football 11 on 11. That means Mariota's got to be a big part of it, whether it's Bill, whether it's Rodriguez, whether it's McNichols. They have to run the football against Detroit. They certainly have to try to run the football. I just don't know that they can win enough in man coverage, whether they can hold up enough in protection. So to me, their best opportunity is to run the football 11 on 11. This cannot be 9 called pass plays in your first 10, Cliff. More on Cliff in a moment. Run the football 11 on 11. Get it done. Don't shy away from it. And it's got to be with the quarterback, options, designed runs. I think with as much man coverage as Detroit plays, you definitely, especially on these 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 9s, quarterback draw. Don't rely on man beaters, if your guys aren't going to win. In a passing situation on a 3rd and 10, run a quarterback draw with people playing man coverage and having their backs turned. Mariota can run, man. He looks and has looked great running the football. Run QB counters where you've got 10 blocking and the quarterback is involved. That's 11 on 11 football. Quarterback counters, quarterback power, quarterback draws, zone reads. They really are fast defensively, though. I don't know how well some of those read options would really work against Detroit. But keep it on the ground right in front of you. Go after them with 11 on 11 football and don't give up. Worst case, if you don't make a first down, you've run 40 seconds times 2 if you ran the ball twice. So you're shortening the game a little bit. Number 2, after run the football 11 on 11, I think this has got to be a Cliff game. And what I mean by that is, A, you've got to, be balanced in this game. You've got to try to run the football. B, you got to scheme some people open in this game. You don't have people on the field Sunday that can win consistently against all the man coverage that Detroit plays. And you don't think Detroit knows that? Like, they will be able to, in any passing situation, play man across the board and come after you. And you didn't hold up against Seattle with your pass pro. You're not going to hold up against this team consistently either. So you got to scheme some stuff up. I mean, I think against man coverage gives you an opportunity to screen them. Bubble screens, traditional screens, running back screens. But you've got to figure out a way specifically. Smarter people, when it comes to football X's and O's would tell you, how to scheme up some guys that can't get open against man coverage to get open. But we've seen guys do it over and over again. We've seen Cliff do it. He didn't do it last week enough. That's for sure. This is a man coverage team, mostly, and they will get after you. So in passing situations, again, I wouldn't shy away against running the football 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, QB draws, or, you run a sweep, and try to get outside against nickel. And run the football. Don't be afraid to run the football on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. But this is Cliff's game. If they end up having to throw the football, you've got to be able to scheme some people open. And against man coverage versus a lot of zone, harder when they're looking at it, right? Eyes, on quarterback, eyes on receivers. That's a harder screen situation. Man, we should see some screens this week. Number 3, it's really simple. You can't win this game unless Detroit helps out. I know this is cliche, and I know that I've hit on this now for 3 weeks running because of what they have out there on the field. But they've been at a major sort of personnel disadvantage for several weeks running with all of the lost players. You have to rely on the other team this week to self-destruct. Jared Goff did it against us in the playoff game. The Lions did it. They also, threw the wide receiver double pass, which was kind of silly. So I went back and looked at a game that I would consider to be sort of a comp to this game. In 2017, Washington went to Seattle. They were a 9-point dog. They had guys like Brian Quick on the field, Terrell Pryor on the field. They had the week before 3 new offensive linemen in the game, where basically they introduced themselves to the team before the Dallas game, the week before they were in the game. This was a no-chancer, like a no-chancer. And they pulled it off. If you remember, Kirk hit Brian Quick and then hit Josh Doxson down to the 1-yard line, and they punched it in, and they won shockingly 17-14. I went back and looked at that game. One of the reasons, actually the reason they won that game more than anything else. No, I'm not about to give Kirk all the credit. He was big time when it mattered. But 16 penalties for 138 yards by the Seahawks in that game. 2 turnovers and 16 penalties. You need something like that on Sunday from Detroit. You need them to take themselves off the field, because defensively you're not going to have our defense take them off the field. Not that team. I mean, Gibbs, Montgomery, Laporta, Williams, Amon-Ra. Who's going to cover Amon-Ra? Seriously. So you need like one of those games, and it happens in the NFL, and sometimes you go back and you're like, that wasn't really a hold, or that wasn't really offensive, pass interference, or that wasn't really an illegal formation. You need all of that Sunday. I've talked about this the last few weeks, that offensively, Washington cannot afford to make mistakes, and they keep making mistakes. 3 penalties on the first 3 drives against the Seahawks. I don't think they were ever going to win that game to begin with, but you had no chance of even making it a game when, you're at their 40 after 2 first downs, and you've got a 15-yard face mask on a play that moved the sticks on a 3rd and 2. You can't do that offensively. So you can't self-destruct, and Detroit has to. How about that, by the way? I certainly remember that Seattle game. It was, flukish, it seemed like at the end. They didn't do much offensively all night, and then they go 80 yards on the final drive. Quick makes this obscene catch, and then Doxson makes maybe the best play of his very short and disappointing first-round pick career in Washington with a contested catch at the 1-yard line. But 16 penalties the Seahawks had in that game. You need Detroit double-digit penalties and 2 to 3 turnovers to win this game. That's it. That's the game right there. Number 1, you've got to run the football 11 on 11 with Mariota being a big part of it. Number 2, Cliff has got to offensively scheme up some people open, because they are a man coverage team and they get after the quarterback. And I think quick screens and bubbles and even some traditional screens where you let that rush come in and then it's off to Bill or it's off to, Rodriguez or McNichols, against guys with their backs turned running downfield. He's got to scheme up some stuff, because you don't have anybody on the field that can beat man coverage consistently. They just don't. Who's going to be on the field Sunday? Is Treylon Burks going to wake up and decide, now I'm going to show you why I was a first-round pick? Okay. He's big. Maybe Burks is the guy you take shots with because of his size. Here comes zero coverage. They're coming after it. They're playing man behind it. Give him a shot. Lob one up there down the sideline. See if he can come up with it. You got to make some of those plays. And then lastly, this has to be a game in which you're flawless and Detroit self-destructs. If we get all that, got a shot to win, a 20-17 game late, something like that. It's a lot to ask. I'm not asking for 16 penalties for 138 yards, but how about 10 for 95 yards and 2 turnovers to go with it? With Washington, 4 penalties for 25 yards and 0 turnovers, and 0 drops. The drop thing is not even a thing anymore because it's hard to even get somebody open consistently. I do think off of watching the Minnesota game, as good as I said Detroit's defense is, and that was the surprise after sort of preparing for today. I do think that maybe with Mariota, and it would have been the same with Jayden, a healthy Jayden. Maybe 11 on 11 running the football, they got a shot because McCarthy wasn't really necessarily a big part of the run game. He was as a scrambler. But Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones had themselves a combo day, 19 for 114. So, and that's without the quarterback being, a significant part of the run game. If you look back at Detroit this year, they played Lamar in week 3. That was that Monday night game in which Lamar got, that was the next week against Kansas City was the game that he got hurt in. Baltimore didn't rush the ball super successfully. Lamar and Derrick Henry combined for like 85 yards. It was like 4.5 yards per carry. It was good, but they ended up, remember, they were behind in that game. Lamar threw a bunch, and they had the Derrick Henry fumble, remember, in that game deep in their own territory, and it kind of turned the game. They couldn't get off the field against the Lions in that game. That was the real issue, is the Lions, dominated time of possession, dominated fourth down, dominated third down, ended up with 440 or something like that in yardage, and beat the Ravens 38-30. This to me is a better chance than last Sunday, but not that much better. Not that much better. I think Seattle right now, honestly, along with the Rams, are the two best teams in the NFC. I think the Lions are certainly capable of being that. They got to get healthy, though. They are banged up. I still don't know if Washington's good enough defensively to take advantage of that, but maybe they can. All right. We'll talk real quickly about a couple of things, including Maryland and Georgetown tonight. Naki will join us at 11. Give you guys a chance to weigh in on the game Sunday as well on the show. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. This last segment was brought to you by IHOP, introducing the IHOP value menu, where all your breakfast faves are just $6 each every day. Where else can you get a big, filling sit-down breakfast for just $6? Go to your happy plates with the $6 IHOP value menu, available every day at IHOP, $7 in some locations.
All right, happy Friday, everybody. Commanders fans, we have some incredible news to report. Jayden Daniels' dislocated elbow is not as bad as originally feared. Daniels will not need surgery, nor will he be placed on injured reserve. He'll likely be reevaluated after the bye week. Last night, certainly an interesting game of Thursday Night Football. The Broncos get another win, this time over the Raiders, to improve to 8-2 in an absolute barn burner of a game that ended 10-7. Caps, they fall to the Penguins last night on the second night of a back-to-back by a score of 5-3. Tonight, the Wizards, they take on the Cavs over on 106.7 The Fan. Tip-off at 7 p.m. Pre-game coverage underway at 6:45. And Maryland basketball takes on Georgetown Hoyas on Team 9, right here on the Team 980. Pre-game gets going at 5:30. Tip-off set for 6 p.m. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Denton's office throughout all football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
So tonight in College Park, 6 p.m. tip for Maryland and Georgetown. They signed to play a 4-game. They're committed to 4 games over the next 4 years against each other. This is the biggest commitment in terms of games against each other since the 1970s. Ed Cooley was on with us the other day. We'll get Buzz on soon. We had Buzz on over the summer, I think in August. But Maryland and Georgetown to hopefully really restart the rivalry that once was. But really, it was a rivalry that was about not playing each other for many, many decades. But tonight at Xfinity in College Park, then next year Capital One, then back to Xfinity, and then back to Capital One. And hopefully it'll be the first 4 of many, many more years to come. Talked about this many times over the years. I think it's been a missing big sporting event on the DC, the DMV sports calendar for too long. What's interesting is now that it is back for the next 4 years, the town's a different town. You know, we're a pro sports town. We weren't always a pro sports town. It feels like that. And it feels like, you know, the college sports, which has always been about basketball, you know, Maryland and Georgetown in particular, you know, even they've become programs that, you know, there's a bit of a bandwagon effect to it. When they're really great, people are into it. When they're not so much. With Maryland, they didn't have to be great. There was an anticipation every year, but maybe this will inject some juice into the marketplace when it comes to college basketball. This has been something that so many of us have wanted for so long. For those of you that don't know the history of Maryland and Georgetown, they basically played for, you know, many, many years, going back to the early 1900s. And they play every year. And Lefty arrived in 1969, Lefty Drizel at Maryland, John Thompson, you know, a couple of years later. And Maryland and Georgetown continued to play, you know, every year. And Maryland pretty much dominated the series during the bulk of the 1970s. And I mean, they won games against Georgetown by 30, 32, 26, 33. Like, they blew Georgetown out on the regular from, you know, essentially 1971 through 1977. Maryland was, in the 1970s, for those that don't know it, it was a top 10 program under Lefty Drizel. They were every year a top 10 team, some years top 5. Their 1974 team is probably the greatest team in the history of college basketball not to go to the NCAA tournament. It changed the rule. Back then, only one team per conference could go to the NCAA tournament. After they lost the ACC tournament final in 1974 to NC State, they changed the rule. They opened up the tournament. They expanded it. They allowed more than one team from each conference to go. That 74 team would have been an easy Final Four team had it been an at-large, you know, team. But it wasn't. The next year, ironically, they were the first out of the ACC to get an at-large bid because they won the conference regular season. They didn't win the tournament, and they got to the Elite Eight that year. They weren't as good as they had been the year before. McMillan and Elmore had graduated. Anyway, Georgetown started to get competitive with John Thompson, mid to late 70s. Here come the Hoyas, and they knocked the Terps off in 1978. And then in 1979, a very famous local college basketball game between Maryland and Georgetown played at the DC Armory on December 4th, 1979. Georgetown beat Maryland 83-71. Buck Williams did not play in the game. He was injured and did not play in the game. And famously, Lefty and John nearly came to blows at the scorer's table. Over what they've both argued, and they did while they were alive. It was about a number of different things, but Big John MF'd Lefty, and Lefty, you know, slung it right back. And then that was it, except for later that year in the Sweet 16 at the Spectrum in Philadelphia, Maryland and Georgetown head-to-head in a Sweet 16 game, 1980 NCAA tournament. Trust me when I tell you that this was one of the biggest local sporting events of the 25 years that preceded it. Maryland and Georgetown head-to-head in the NCAA tournament Sweet 16. John had basically said after they beat Lefty and beat Maryland in the Armory earlier that year, we're not playing Maryland anymore. And Maryland thought, and they were favored to win that Sweet 16 game because Buck Williams was back. And Georgetown with Sleepy Floyd and Bebe John Dern, et cetera, they won that game 74-68. They lost the Elite Eight game 2 days later to Iowa, but that was it. John said no more. We are building a national program, not a local program. We're not playing Maryland anymore. And for 13 years, the series was dormant. And during all of those years, it was like, come on, man. Let's get Lefty and John together. Let's get Gary. And Lefty and John were never going to make it happen. What's really interesting is they became, as they got older, really good friends. I mean, John spoke about Lefty in such glowing terms. He used to say, without Lefty, there would have been no Georgetown. And Lefty loved John, too, as they got older. It was actually, they were on together a couple of times on the station, and it was always fun. But John and Georgetown, this from a Maryland perspective, okay? And John pushes back and did over the years, but he does not disagree that he was more interested in building a national program rather than playing local teams. And if you knew anything about Georgetown, they didn't like scheduling non-conference tough schedules. It was St. Leo and Hawaii Hilo. And the reason for that is the Big East was loaded. Well, so was the ACC, but Maryland played a lot of good non-conference games. Anyway, the series went dormant until they somehow convinced John in 1993 for, as a charitable kind of thing to play Maryland in the season opener, November 26th, 1993 at US Air Arena, Capitol Center, etc. in Landover. This game was the first game of the year. It was a Friday after Thanksgiving. The place, I was there. I'll never forget it. It was basically 80% Maryland fans, even though it was a Georgetown home game. And Dwayne Simpkins won the game with a floater in overtime, and they beat Georgetown 84-83. You'll hear the highlight when we come back and we talk to Naki. But there was nothing other than that one-off that they played. So then they went another 8 years before they played, and they played in the Sweet 16 in 2001. And out in Anaheim, Maryland thumped Georgetown by 10. That was their first Final Four trip. They beat Stanford 2 days later, went to the Final Four, lost the 22-point lead against Duke in that Final Four, won the national championship the next year. Then in a very kind of happenstance, double elimination, preseason November tournament, they ended up in, not intentionally, inside of the same losers bracket in November, and Georgetown beat Maryland in November of 2008. But that was not a scheduled game, nor was the Sweet 16 game a scheduled game. But Mark Turgeon and JT3 for the Dave Gavitt games decided to play each other twice. 2015, 2016, Maryland won both of them in Xfinity Center and in Capital One. What a game that was. That was their last meeting, 2016. Maryland was down 9 with 2 minutes to go. You had Mello, Trimble. You had just an incredible effort by Maryland to come back and win that game. God, that was a thrilling game if you're a Maryland fan. So they haven't played since 2016. So here we are now 9 years later. 2 different coaches. Kevin Willard was the one that put this into play with Ed Cooley. He was the one that really said, yeah, we're going to do this. Buzz Williams and Ed Cooley have history of coaching against each other. So hopefully this will be the first of 4 years, and then hopefully more 4-year deals after that. This should be a staple. But tonight, a lot of us are upset about the 6 p.m. start. Maryland notoriously for these big games that start early, a little bit, quiet until everybody gets in. The second half will be nuts, though. Hopefully it'll be good at the beginning. Maryland's a 7.5-point favorite in this game tonight. I did not see that coming. But these are the 2 heavyweight programs, always have been in town, and they should play every year. I think it's good for the area. It's really good for an area that is, at its core, a basketball market. Looking forward to tonight. It's early. As Coach Thompson used to say, November college basketball means nothing. Nothing. Yeah, it means something tonight, though. Recruiting, pride. Yeah. Chris Naki will join me next.
we're down to it now. Let's see who Maryland goes to. I'm betting on Smith. I think it's the Booth. I think it's the Booth-Smith connection. It's been strong all afternoon. Simpkins is going to handle the basketball. Let's see if he angles his way to the right side to try to get to Smith. Simpkins with the ball.
Simpkins makes the move. Simpkins himself. Simpkins got it. 3.5 seconds left. Remember the shot clock. The game clock stopped. Here comes Millen. He didn't get it off. Maryland pulls off the upset of 15th ranked Georgetown. The final in overtime, Maryland 84 and Georgetown 83. Oh, what a big win for Gary Williams. What a terrific win for him. The Terps are back.
Yeah, that right there just had the hair on the back of my neck standing up because that was an amazing win. Maryland was coming off those probation years, those super dark years. That was the debut of Joe Smith. By the way, 26 points, 9 rebounds, 4 block shots, and 3 steals for Joe Smith in his first game. And to beat Georgetown at US Air Arena that day was memorable. And Gary was pumped. And the Terps went on that year to go to the Sweet 16, where they lost to Michigan in the Sweet 16, and what was remaining of the Fab Five, which was all of it minus Weber, who had gone out the year before. All right, tonight, Maryland and Georgetown for the first time in 9 years. It'll be the first of at least 4 years in a row. College Park, 6 p.m. tip. People, if you got to take off work early, leave early. Let's get that building filled up right from the beginning. Students, you should be there well in advance, hopefully, of the game tonight. It is one of those, I think, gold rush games. Chris Nockey will be on the call with Johnny Holiday tonight. It's a whole new Maryland team. It's pretty much a whole new Georgetown team. But look, you've been in this, this is home for you now. You coached here. You know the significance of Maryland and Georgetown in all of those years that they didn't play. What are your thoughts on the day in which we actually have a legitimate series that's scheduled for the next 4 years?
Yeah, Kevin, I was thinking about this morning. I was actually courtside when Lefty and John had that famous fracas.
At the Armory.
At the Armory, DC Armory. I was playing for AU at the time, and we had played Navy in the first game of a doubleheader. And I was sitting in the third row behind the scorer's table for the Georgetown-Maryland game and watched all that unfold. And there's so much history, and some of it is non-history because they just didn't play for so long.
Right.
And then, you fast forward, the last 2 times they played. So that was, you should mention, 9 and 10 years ago. And those games were sort of forced on both schools by the powers that be. Those were part of the Gavitt games.
Right.
And those.
But Turge and JT3 were friends, right? Which also facilitated it.
Yeah. And I think they ended up flipping a coin to see who got the first home game. And, it's kind of funny. Your boy, SVP, the first game was Maryland, the first game that was played in the series.
He did a show from there.
He did the show, but I remember Georgetown played their tails off in that game, and then what happened was Maryland ended up coming. Maryland was loaded, preseason 2 or 3 or something like that, and Maryland ended up coming back to win. And I'm thinking, as I'm leaving, then I watched Sports Center, and Scott had on Lehman, and the Terps that played well in that game, and I was thinking how much it would have sucked for Scott to have Georgetown go there.
Yeah. No, I know. I remember that very much.
Yeah. And then the next year, Maryland had a very young team and stole one at Cap One Arena. In down 9 with about a minute 20 to play, and winning by 1. I watched that this morning. I watched the last 5 minutes of that game this morning. Still can't.
Cowan was huge.
Herder made the block, but it was Melo. Melo got to the line time after time after time. And when you score with the clock stopped, that's easily the best way to erase a lead for sure.
I remember being in that arena. By the way, that was one of those weird, 6 o'clock starts or whatever. Yeah. But by the second half, that place was electric at MCI or whatever it was called. Yeah, Capital One maybe at that point. I don't even know. But I remember, CJ and all the Georgetown guys who we all know, I remember just saying, we're not playing you anymore now. That's it. We're done. Because it was 2 wins in a row, and stealing that one felt so much better than even the year before because it seemed like it was over and Georgetown fans were so confident.
Yeah,
that's what we've missed over the years. That feeling of, for a year, we've got bragging rights.
Yeah, and this might be the best vestige that Kevin Willard left us, because of course he was great. He's great friends with Ed Cooley, and
right.
They decided to play, and I'm not sure it gets done otherwise. So yeah, I'm excited, and I don't know what to expect at 6 o'clock. I would think at 7 o'clock the place will be packed, and it'll be great atmosphere for a game.
All right. Yeah, by the way, and you and I both know this, and we both love him dearly, Coach Thompson, and we miss him terribly. But if he's still alive, this doesn't happen. He hated that it happened in 15 and 16. He said, he was like to
100%.
JT, he's like to his son, what are you doing? We don't do this. We don't play them.
Again, it was forced. The powers that be in the conferences, as part of the Gavitt games, made this decision and forced, made them eat their spinach.
Right.
I mean, basically, it's going to be good for you.
So, what to expect tonight? I mean, this must be tough for you. I mean, it's one game. It's 15 new players. Georgetown's got a lot of new players. I can tell you this, Georgetown fans are excited about what they have. They think they're going to be a lot better. Maryland's a 7.5-point favorite tonight. I was surprised by that. But let's
understand that. But okay.
So let's start with Maryland. What did you see in that opener? What have you seen when you've been out there watching practice? I mean, I thought the freshman Darius Adams looked like a baller.
Yeah, he can really play, and the big guy's very good for Alpayne.
Yeah.
He's a tough matchup and he's been in school a long time. You don't have a guy with that many games under his belt at that position. Those two guys are solid. One of the things I like about the team is that every time I've seen them, and I probably went to 5 or 6 practices, and now this is their third game, third opportunity wearing uniform. But every time I've seen them, I think they got better. They did have a spate of injuries, and at least one of which is going to be pretty long lasting. Solomon Washington, a guy they could really, really use. But they're good. They just it's, you mentioned it, Kevin. I mean, we did that game against Coppin State. There were 24 new players, 24 players in that game that were new to their teams.
Yeah.
That's absurd, and it's probably a similar number tonight, but it's kind of the way things are at this point. You got to deal with it. You got to learn these guys, and it's there's a process involved with this. But the Terps have gotten better. I think that this is a big time atmosphere game tonight, and these guys will be we'll love the opportunity to play in front of this kind of crowd.
You mentioned Naki's joining us, of course, right now. You mentioned Solomon Washington. He was with Buzz at Texas A&M, really strong defender, et cetera. There was a lot of excitement for him when he came with Buzz. The other guy that's missing is Miles Rice, the transfer from Indiana. And I'm just wondering because, I read a lot and I watched the other night, but who are their best players? I mean, Payne clearly, like you discussed, for those that don't know, Pharrell Payne was at Minnesota. If you're a Terp fan, you remember how athletic he was. Then he was at A&M with Buzz. He's 6'9", 250, can jump out of the gym. So they've got, a big, but what about the rest of it? Like I thought, the freshmen look good. I like the Kansas transfer. Who are you focusing in on as the guys that are going to be, the guys when we get a month, 2 months down the road are going to be a part of the top 7 or 8?
Yeah, well, I mean, Washington, I think, would have been a big-time player with this lineup, with this group. I think the one thing that worries me is a little bit is the depth, particularly interior depth. But the guys who I think are going to be the key guys, you mentioned Miles Rice. He's been hurt. I'm not sure about his status tonight. But David Coit, the Kansas transfer, the guy you mentioned, he's one of those. He's played a lot of college basketball. He was a prolific scorer at Northern Illinois. He's one of those guys that he led his conference in scoring, that MAC conference, and then he transferred to Kansas. He played every game at Kansas, but his role changed. You know, he became much more of a traditional point guard. He didn't have to score 19 a game. So I think that he's going to be a huge part of the equation because he is a natural point guard. He and Miles Rice are really the only natural points on this team. So I think a lot of the heavy lifting is going to fall to those guys. You mentioned Darius Adams. He's been playing point because Miles Rice has been out, but I'd much rather see him on the wing just hunting shots, hunting scoring opportunities. He's got a natural nose to get to the free throw line. I think he's a much better shooter than he showed against Coppin State. And I think that, he's a 5-star guy also. There's a lot of pressure on him, and he seems to have that skill set. We'll just see how it all unfolds for him this year. 6'5", long, angular, a little bit thin, but wiry and very talented.
In watching Coit the other night, for me, there was I didn't really see him. He didn't play a lot at Kansas. There was a little bit of Fats Russell in him. Am I right about that or not?
I'd take that in a heartbeat.
Me too.
Because that's the second half of Fats. We only had him 1 year.
Yeah.
Second half that he had, second half of the season was phenomenal. He was great. He's got that in him. And I like the fact, Kevin, in his background, that wasn't last year, but he's a guy who was really able to put points up for you. And I think in college basketball, a guy at that size, assuming he plays a certain way, can really be effective. And he's a bulldog defensively, gets a lot of loose balls. And like I said, he's been around forever. I think that maturity really helps you. But when you're putting together a team on the fly, I think to have that level of maturity is really, really critical.
Tell me about Mills, because I didn't know much about him. He didn't start. I don't think he started, or maybe he was in the starting lineup. Del Pino, the kid from Spain, was in the starting lineup the other night. But he looks like just an absolute bulldog competitor. And by the way, not afraid to put him up. I love the stroke too. Where does he fit into all of this?
Well, that to me is his singular best attribute, is his shooting. I mean, he's really a knockdown shooter. I think in a perfect world, having watched them practice, I think he's one of their 5 best players. I think he's likely, assuming good health and everything like that, that I think he's likely to be a starting wing. He and Adams would be your starting wings. And because he really shoot it. I don't see the bulldog necessarily that you see, but I see a skilled elite guy who
I just was more like as a competitor. I mean, he had a relentless motor the other night.
Yeah, and I think he was so eager to play because he'd been out for a while. He missed that UNBC game, and he was part of the boot parade that night where a bunch of guys on the sidelines.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'd be shocked if he weren't a starter this year, and a starter in a lot of games. Assuming good health, he's just got that skill set and experience as well. He and Miles Rice played together a few years ago at Washington State, and it's just a nice it's a nice compliment there. And I think in a perfect world, you've got Miles Rice is your starter, and then Watts and the freshman on the wings, and then you've got
Watts and Adams, or Mills and Adams.
I'm sorry, I think Watts. Now Mills is a bulldog. There's no question about it. Yeah, he plays hard. He's like Deshaun Harris-Smith with
that's what I was saying. Game. I was talking about Mills.
Yeah, okay. He plays hard, and he.
Watts definitely is a knockdown shooter. I mean, he's hunting everything from behind the arc.
Yeah, I'm sorry, misunderstood you. I think Watts is going to be a starter. Mills and Coit be your 6th and 7th man coming off the bench, and it's pretty good depth in your backcourt.
We didn't mention Saunders. I thought he was really impressive and looks like he can play the transfer from Virginia.
Yeah, and he's an older guy. He's played at San Diego State and UVA, so he's played in different systems. He's really mature, great teammate and great guy. A little undersized, and he's not overly athletic. He's strong as an ox, but he spreads the floor. He reminds me of years ago, Gary Williams really took advantage one year and had opponents, I know, just shaking their heads remember Dave Neal just used to sit outside and nail threes, and he was really undersized for his position.
Right.
And I think Saunders, you know, is it sort of reminds me of giving you that kind of capability, strong enough to kind of handle himself inside defensively, but can really make shots for you.
It's odd, you know, the game now. It's like, you know, I know when you have a coaching change, you have a lot of new players, but Buzz had to basically recruit an entire team of 15 players, and it'll take some time before we really know what he has in this first year. But I'm just curious, your early hunch, you know, like some of the very too early bracketologists have Maryland kind of as a bubble team, some on the right side, some on the wrong side. Do you see a team that could come together? Do they have enough talent to be a team that could be, you know, in the top half of the Big Ten, which would put you clearly in the running for an NCAA tournament berth?
I think if you're in the top 2/3 of the Big
Almost.
Ten, you know, I just think that's the way it works. And yeah, I do. You know, the hard part about the whole prognostication thing, you know, aside from Purdue, who returns, you know, two critical players, and Michigan, you know who Michigan's got, and they brought in the best transfer in the portal, and but it's a crapshoot. Yeah, tell me who Indiana's starting five is right now.
I know, possible. Same level of turnover, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why it's kind of folly, you know, that when you read these prognostications and you know who's got who where. I just, you know, they have enough talent. I hope they have enough size. Obviously, Payne gives them plenty of size, and then it boils down to staying healthy, you know, having the right guys available for the right games, and then taking advantage of opportunities. For instance, in November, they play a lot of high-level games. We go to Vegas, play three games. Georgetown, obviously, we're at Marquette next week. You know, so if you know, you have to steal a couple of these. You know, and that gives you a real nice springboard.
You know, it's really true, because even though you're not ready for these games and you will be a completely different team at the end of the year than you are now, these games matter. You know, they matter right now because they end up being the differentiators, you know, when it gets down to, you know, the at-large selections. And like you said, it's Georgetown next Saturday. They're at Marquette, Buzz Williams' former team. They've got UNLV and Gonzaga Thanksgiving week in Vegas. They've got, by the way, of their two Big Ten games, one of them's at home against Michigan, who's a top 5, top 6 team. They play Virginia in Charlottesville before the end of the year. So this wasn't Buzz's schedule necessarily, but I love it. Like I prefer this, don't you? When you've got 5 or 6 really good non-conference games.
I prefer it when I'm not coaching.
Yeah.
You didn't even mention the fact that we go. One of the games we have also is at Iowa, which is as difficult.
Oh, of course.
To play.
Yeah.
You know, those are two early Big Ten games, or here against Michigan and at Iowa. Those are two really difficult games. So, yeah, I love it. It's phenomenal. I'd much rather play this way than the converse to this, you know, where you're sitting there struggling to get through a 40-minute game. It's this, and then I think that it'll endear. You know, I think the fans will love to see it. I think, you know, we had a lot of sleepwalking going on last year in the schedule from fans in November and December. People weren't coming out for games, and I think that'll change.
Yeah. All right. Enjoy it. I'll hopefully get a chance to see you out there tonight. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll look for you.
All right. Chris Nocky, everybody. 6 o'clock tip, 5:30 pregame with Nocky and Johnny Holiday right here on your home for Maryland basketball. Maryland and Georgetown tonight. Yeah, the Terps 7.5-point favorites. I was surprised to see that. You just don't know this time of year. And even if, you know, somebody looks really good, we got a long way to go. But your several chances, you know, to catch the Terps at home this year before conference play begins. I mean, the conference matchup against Michigan on December 13th, Michigan's top 6 in the country right now. That is going to be a big-time home game before they get into the thick of the Big Ten schedule. All right, Ben Standig coming up. I do want to mention real quickly that if you've been thinking about new windows, you've got older windows, you want your home to look nicer, All I ask is just give Window Nation a chance to come out to your home and give you a free in-home estimate. You're not going to work with a better customer service company. You're not going to work with a better company in terms of their product. And right now, you will save big if you decide to move forward with Window Nation. Their end of year sale is underway. That means 50% off all window styles, with a chance, if you decide to finance the purchase, to not get charged any interest for 5 years. 0% financing for 5 years. You won't pay interest until the year 2030. Your total price includes Window Nation's professional one-day installation. Window Nation's proven quality windows are really good. They'll save you money on your heating bills in the winter, your air conditioning bills in the summer, and they come with and they are backed by a lifetime warranty. Don't wait. Window Nation's end of year sale is your chance to save big. 50% off all window styles, 0% financing for 5 years. Sale ends soon. Call them for your free in-home estimate today, 866-90-NATION, or go to windownation.com. Ben Standing's with us a little bit early today because Quinn's going to talk in his normal slot at 12 noon. We'll try to carry some of that. We'll see what the coach says about the Jayden injury, but there was news about the Jayden injury this morning, and I'll let Ben, we talked about it earlier, but I'll let you kind of share with everybody what you know.
Yeah, so good news. I mean, he still has a dislocated elbow, but it's no ligament damage, which means no surgery required, which this was not offered up by the team, but in speaking with a medical professional this week, could mean a, 4 to 6, maybe up to 8 week recovery period, which keeps open the door that he could be playing this year. Again, he's not on IR. That could change their mind later. But for now, they're leaving that option open. And, maybe after the bye week, perhaps we see him back on the field.
What do you think will happen? You think he'll be back in the lineup this year?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a nervous Nelly with these things, so I tend to be on the overly optimistic or overly cautious side of things. I mean, the argument for him playing, I mean, not only is he here to play football, but, he's only played 6 games this year. This is only his second season. It hasn't been nearly the rocket ship that it was last year. So if you giving him more work helps, maybe smooth over some issues or just, get just to play, might be worth it. But I don't know. We'll see. We're right now we're still sort of viewing it as, hey, could he come back? Should they have a little bit of success here and not completely fall off? On the other hand, I don't know that they would bother with the draft pick game, but should Washington get into the, bottom, top 10 pick, do you want to win games? You know what I mean? How that goes. I mean, they will never not want to win, but you know what I mean? Like depending on who you put out there could be a factor. So I still would kind of lean towards being overly cautious, but hey, if he's potentially back in 4 to 5 games, then there would be still plenty of time for him to go back in. And then at that point, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if this is, let's just call it a 4-week injury, there's the possibility he'll only miss 3 games because of the bye. And then you've got 5 left. You've got the entire month of December. You've got the 1 game in January against the Eagles to close the season out. I just don't know how you would, no matter what the record is, and let's just say it's 3-9, worst case, they lose the next 3. I just don't know how you don't play your second-year quarterback at all and you walk away from this season having him played a total of 5.5 games. When there was another 5, or 4 or 5 potential games for him to play.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, it just depends on, I don't know what their time frame is, what their surgeons have said, things along those lines. But if it's on the closer end of a recovery period that, seems to be the norm for a dislocated elbow that has no ligament damage, then yeah, he could be back sooner than later and be there for that stretch run, at least when they're playing all the NFC East teams to close out the year. Sure. Well, yeah. If there's too much time, why would you not play him? But like I said, I'm a nervous Nelly with these things, so cautious is fine with me.
What have you made this week of all of the Jayden talk? Kurt Warner and his video. I don't know if you watched it or not. I did. Look, I mean, we've been dealing now for 2 weeks anyway, if not 3, of fire everybody from, I think a very small portion of the fan base, pretty hysterical portion of the fan base. But what do you make of the Jayden talk this week?
Yeah, I actually haven't watched the Kurt Warner video, but I did a little bit better. I actually spoke with Kurt Warner and wrote about it on
you did?
Substack. Yeah.
All right, tell me.
Yeah, I mean, so I had asked if he could come on. He then called me, and I said, "Hey, Kurt, thanks for doing this." And he then proceeded to talk for the next 8 minutes straight. Barely took a breath about what he's been seeing. And I think, like his point was that he's not watching what the defenses are doing week over week to Jayden and to Cliff Kingsbury's offense. He's not really completely focused on that. All the receivers are hurt. I mean, he's aware, of course, but he's not like that's not his deal. He's just looking at the quarterback, what the quarterback is doing, seeing, and all that. And from his perspective, Jayden's hesitating way more than he did a year ago. And the question is why is that occurring? And from his perspective, from Kurt Warner's perspective, he's watching his eyes and he seems to wonder if last year his first read was just constantly open. Obviously, you and I would say, well, we saw games where it wasn't, but that his opening reads were open, and therefore was a little bit easier just to drop back and throw. Whereas now he may be having to go deeper in the progression, and that's leading to him either being jumpy in the pocket and immediately kind of running out. I think he kind of did that in the first two plays against Seattle, or just not seeing some guys. Now the question is, and Warner acknowledged this, like if you're expecting a 15-yard in route and Terry McLaurin's your guy, you're pretty confident he's going to win the battle and be there. You may be less confident if it's somebody else out there, one of these other guys who've been filling in, and maybe that's led to some of the hesitancy as well. So basically, Warner, to me, and I think what he said publicly was he didn't really sugarcoat it. He's just not seeing the same guy as last year. And he even threw out the scenario of similar. He also mentioned C.J. Stroud to me, who had a very similar scenario with Jayden. Great rookie year, has been a little bit down since. That perhaps the rookie year for C.J. Stroud was the high end of what we'll see. And, he'll help show it here and there, but not consistently. And he didn't say that for Jayden because it's obviously only been a short amount of time and he's hurt this year. But, he said that's something he's going to be watching going forward, at least.
I got somebody sent this to me, and I'm going to read it to you. Maybe somebody sent it to you too, and I'm just curious as to what your reaction is. And I have not responded to this either on the radio show. I did it with Tommy yesterday, but somebody sent me this from T-Resh. He wrote, I think Dan Quinn is a genuinely sincere and upfront person. I also don't know if he truly believes he made the wrong decision on Sunday as much as he knows he made the right decision on Monday by absorbing the blame and shutting the debate down and trying to move the team forward. This is obviously in reference to not pulling Jayden out of the game before he got injured, at the point in which I think many people thought he should be pulled out, which is the fourth quarter. I didn't think that was an unreasonable take. I don't agree with it necessarily because I think Dan was genuine, and I think Dan really thought about it after the emotion of it and said, damn, we probably should have pulled him a series earlier than we were planning on pulling him. What do you think?
Well, I certainly think whether you want to call it an apology or, taking responsibility, that he did on Monday, I think was a very savvy move from his perspective and from the Commanders' PR perspective. It obviously had become a huge that was becoming the narrative. Why the hell is he still out there? And it's a reasonable one, right? I've talked to other football people who did not seem to think it was the world's biggest crisis that he was still in the game. The drive started when it was 12 minutes ago, and not that you're definitively thinking you're going to come back to win, but you're also not thinking the guy's going to get hurt on what's a relatively fluky play. So, I don't know what's in Dan Quinn's heart, but I don't remember if I said this to you the other day or not, but, I think that with these football guys, the coaches, they have to drill into their players at all times the next man up mentality. We don't quit. You got to keep fighting, all these things, right? I think you say that so much that it just becomes part of who you are, your DNA, and therefore maybe it's a little harder to step back and look at it rationally the way that we may be able to do on the outside, because we're not in there telling these guys you have to constantly fight and play. And if you're taking Jayden Daniels off the field, you're throwing up the white flag with whatever it was 12 minutes ago, and maybe that's not even in a coach's mindset at all. Because again, you're telling these guys to go out there. I mean, look, the score was what it was, and you still have to keep playing. So, from that perspective, I could imagine it maybe it's not that Dan Quinn wouldn't do this again in a similar scenario. It would just depend on where the game is at and where his mentality is at, and can he separate himself? If what I'm saying is accurate, can he separate himself from the usual mantra to, okay, hold on, I gotta pull back here.
Yeah, I think, if anything, there's no way you could really debate if you understood the context around this. He's coming off 2 injuries. He's back after the most recent injury for the first time. The game is over. He's got nobody to throw to. They're not protecting him. I mean, the regret, if anything, would be dropping him back twice on that final drive and then running an RPO on the play that he got hurt on. I think that, even he said, we went into it with no reads, no options, no runs, but they did drop him back and they called the RPO, which, let's face it, they hadn't protected, him all night long. So there was a chance it was going to turn into a scramble. That's probably what he should have thought of more than anything else. It's interesting that all of the conversations this week, I think unless you're living the day-to-day granular detail and understand all of the context around all of this, you're basically throwing darts against a wall. Not saying that about Kurt Warner, because I love Kurt Warner. He's one of my all-time favorites. And I watched the video and I thought it was reasonable, and I think there was also some context around all of that as well. We continue here with Ben standings. So they have a game Sunday. This is not the game we thought it would be, when it was on the schedule. Detroit's now, believe it or not, down to a 7.5, 8-point favorite. A lot of sharp money on Washington plus the points. Why do you think that is? Are you giving them more of a chance Sunday against Detroit than maybe people did against Seattle? What do you make of it?
Well, this is, it seems smelly. So this is your expertise. But look, my take has been now for the last couple of weeks that it's not. If I'm going to discuss the Commanders' next game, it's not from an X's and O's perspective. It's not like, hey, if they do this, that, or the other, they could win. I think it's a matter of what's the other team doing. If Detroit comes out like Kansas City did and kind of, I don't say sleeps through the first half, but doesn't exactly come out hot and leaves the door open for Washington to make some plays, then sure, this could be a tough one for Detroit, and Washington could cover. But if Detroit comes out and they're going to be pissed off having lost last week, I'm sure the memory of the playoff loss to Washington is still in their minds. So they come out hot. I don't see how Washington has the firepower offensively to keep up. Not to mention the defense has not been close to being good enough to stop anyone, and Detroit has tons of weapons. So I don't really see it from a football perspective. But again, if you're telling me there's questions on the Lions end of where they're at as a team, okay, then sure, then maybe there's a chance to keep it closer or even shock the world.
They're basically going to be without a lot of players on offense, a lot of players on defense. We all understand that story. Is there anybody that you've thought of in terms of guys that are getting more of an opportunity now that you think maybe they're intrigued by? Like they want to see, they were going to want to see more of this player anyway. Now by, no choice of theirs, they are going to see that player that they're excited about.
Well, I think Jordan McGee would seem to me to be kind of an obvious one, right? I mean, this defense, putting aside the injuries and everything else, they just need more speed and athleticism on defense, and he, gives them that. This was the guy who, when they did their draft in 2024, was the, they do this one sort of consensus group pick in the room, and Jordan McGee was the guy that everybody, sort of said, yeah, let's take the chance on him. Obviously, last year, injuries kind of sapped the momentum from his rookie year, and he was a little bit slow out of the gate this year. But the last couple of weeks in particular, with all the injuries in the front seven, he's played more, and he's shown some of the abilities that they want. He's a relentless pursuer of the ball, athletic, all these things. I think the question becomes, in his case, do you at some point have to have him actually be the middle linebacker with all the responsibilities to see if he is the potential replacement for Bobby Wagner next year? Wagner's a free agent. He's 36. All these things, I wouldn't bet on him returning, but that doesn't mean that Jordan McGee is the answer. So how do you figure this out unless he actually plays and Bobby Wagner sits? I think if this season gets out of hand, then, to me, that would be something you probably have to do. But he would be one guy. I mean, look, the reality is all their draft picks other than Jayden Daniels, there are some positives to look at for sure, but there's at least some question. And, why, none of those guys are definitively, you would say, if we're looking ahead or like definitively the answer for the next X amount of years. There's reason to think so in a couple of guys, but I don't know if we can say it. So they need to get some of these young guys out there, and especially assuming the season, well, not assuming, but if the season, goes the wrong way, it keeps going the wrong way.
Last one, because I know you got to get rolling here. Well, two quick ones. One, surprised that they didn't do anything at the deadline? Did you hear that they were trying? What do you know about not, moving anybody at the deadline?
Yeah, and I'm good for what it's worth here.
Okay.
Look, as we discussed, on the one hand, if they weren't going to quote unquote blow it up, then they didn't really have a ton of guys who were going to be on that higher end of trade talk. And in terms of the trade, there were obviously some trades made before the Tuesday deadline, but in terms of what was happening on Tuesday was the bigger ticket items for the most part that were getting moved, and Washington didn't necessarily have those. I mean, I spoke to sources around the league in the days leading up to the deadline, including a few general managers. And when I presented, here's Washington's, realistic players, the one guy who was constantly getting mentioned as, somebody they would look at would be Andrew Wiley, because every team needs offensive line depth or potentially even starters. And Wiley's a guy that obviously can play in this league. And from Washington's perspective, he's he's good, but he's a little bit redundant with some of the other guys they have that they can turn to on the bench. But ultimately, whether again, we're talking like Wiley in a 7th for a 6th, something like that. I don't know that was on the table and Washington rejected it, but that was like the one guy. If they went crazier and were like, hey, Debo Samuel, Deron Payne are available, I didn't hear anything along those lines, and obviously, nobody's reported that either.
Yeah, and they certainly weren't going to be a buyer.
No. I mean that whether Adam Peters was even willing to trade away any draft capital, let's just say they were, instead of 3 and 6, they were 4 and 5 or whatever. I don't even know that would have been the case, because we know that they're down draft picks from other moves. But yeah, it's definitely not after what's been going on the last couple of weeks.
All right, prediction for Sunday.
Oh boy, this is one of those weeks where the game has been secondary. I mean, like I said, I'm not questioning that these guys are going to go out and try and fight and all that, but it just, again, unless you tell me Detroit comes out and makes, all the turnovers like they did in the playoffs last year, and even then, can Washington take advantage of it? I don't see how they're going to win. So, I think Detroit, something along the lines of, 31-20, something like that. I mean, maybe I'm not listening to the smell, because based on that, Detroit or the Commanders seem like a good play, but I'll just focus on what I can see, and that would be a Lions significant win.
All right, sounds good. I'll talk to you later. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. See you.
Ben Standig, everybody, at Ben Standig on X, on Twitter, has a podcast, Last Man Standing, and writes a Substack column for Last Man Standing as well. This segment of the show brought to you by our good friends at IHOP, everybody. IHOP right now has one of the best deals going that you can imagine. It's the IHOP value menu, where all your breakfast faves are just $6 each every day. Where else can you get a big filling sit-down breakfast for just $6? Go to your happy plates with the $6 IHOP value menu, available every day at IHOP, $7 in some locations.
All right, here's what's happening on this beautiful Friday, November 7th. Commanders fans, we have some incredible news to report. Jayden Daniels' dislocated elbow injury is not as bad as originally feared. Daniels will not need surgery, nor will he be placed on injured reserve. He'll likely be reevaluated after the bye week. Certainly an interesting game last night of Thursday Night Football. Broncos get another win, and this time over the Raiders, to improve to 8-2, and an absolute barn burner that ended by the score of 10-7. The Caps, they fall to the Penguins last night on the second night of a back-to-back. They lose 5-3. Tonight, the Wizards, they take on the Cavs over on 106.7 The Fan. Tip-off at 7 p.m. Pre-game coverage underway at 6:45. And right here on the Team 980, Maryland basketball gets set to take on Georgetown Hoyas hoops right here on the Team 980. Pre-game gets going at 5:30 just after Linnell, and tip-off set early for 6 p.m. Again, that'll be right here on the Team 980. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Den's office throughout all football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us, and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
So last night, the tallest teenager in the world, Olivier Rioux, he's Canadian, French Canadian, I would guess. 7'9" walk-on playing for Florida, the defending champion Florida Gators. Got into his first game, made his college debut. He's 19 years old. He got a loud ovation, pulled off his warm-up jersey, entered the game with 2 minutes and 9 seconds left, and did not touch the basketball once. Not once. Man, I don't know much about this guy. I just saw the highlight on SportsCenter. I don't think I had heard of Olivier Rioux. 7'9" 19-year-old. And I guess maybe it's the Guinness Book of World Records. They've got him on the books right now as the tallest teenager. I don't know if that means he's the tallest teenager ever. I don't know if that's true, but he's currently, according to the AP Wire story, currently the tallest teenager in the world. So there you go. Last night, also, I just wanted to mention this. Last night in women's college basketball, 5th-ranked LSU played Southeast Louisiana. This was, one of those games that, they're hard to avoid. You can't play top 10, top 25 teams or even, good college teams this early in the season. You're, trying to, put a couple of games on there that are kind of warm-up games. Kim Mulkey, the head coach at LSU, scheduled it, Southeast Louisiana. The score at halftime was 52-6. I mean, how does that help you in any way? I mean, I don't know any of the circumstances. I just saw the highlights of the first half. I'm sorry, my bad. The score at halftime wasn't 52-6. The score at halftime was 61-6. The highlight that they just showed had the scoreboard up in front of me. 61-6 at halftime. You've got a 55-point lead at halftime. I would assume they went to a running clock. I mean, the lead kept growing. At one point it was 82-11. At another point it was 91-13. I mean, a 78-point lead at the end of the third quarter. I mean, I'm assuming Mulkey did everything she could, putting in all of the subs. I looked at the box score, and the starters, only one starter played 20 minutes. They were all, the others were all in the, mid to high teens. The bench players, in which she played 7 players off the bench, all had double-digit minutes. God. Final score, if you're wondering, 115-26. So an 89-point win, that would be. The fourth quarter score was 24-13 with the scrubs. 61-6. 91-13 at the end of the third quarter. I think that happens occasionally in women's basketball, women's college basketball. You see it occasionally, but that just doesn't help anybody, I can't imagine. All right. Dan Quinn scheduled to talk this upcoming hour. We'll go around the NFL, and yeah, I've got my smell test picks. We've got a prediction opportunity on the game on Sunday. All of that coming up and more on the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, theteam980.com. Don't forget, we are live on the Team 980's YouTube channel. If you watch the show, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there.
The biggest plays and clutch moments.
Oh, look out! Touchdown! A miracle!
It's time to go around the NFL.
All right, let's start off in Berlin on a Sunday night with a running back battle for the ages.
Sunday morning, I think.
Yeah, it is Sunday morning.
But it would be Sunday afternoon, Berlin.
In Berlin. But yes, Jonathan Taylor and the Colts take on Bijan Robinson and the Falcons. Colts coming in off of this one with another loss to a playoff team. The Steelers were second, the Rams were first, and the Falcons enter this one off a 1-point loss to New England, where the story might have looked a little bit different if John Parker Roma made the extra point. Now the Falcons have brought in a familiar name to Commanders fans, Zane Gonzalez. Kickoff, 9:30 a.m., head referee Clete Blankman. Colts favored by 6.5 points, over-unders 48.5. Which team bounces back in this one, Kev?
Do we know how much Sauce Gardner is going to play in this game?
So he has been listed as a full participant in practice. He was dealing with a concussion or something like that. That's what he was on the injury report for, but I'm pretty sure he's going to play. Okay. I'm not sure how much, though.
I mean, it'd be a great matchup to see him against Drake London. You know, Drake London is really developing into a big-time number one wide receiver. He had missed a couple of weeks, came back last week against the Patriots. 14 targets, 9 catches, 118 yards, 3 touchdowns in that game. And I'm telling you, all 3 of them were big-time contested catches. You know, he's the guy I am pretty sure in the 2022 draft Washington would have selected had he been there at number 11 overall. You know, instead they traded back. You know, Olave got picked by Saints who traded up. I think if London had fallen, that's who they wanted. He's a big dude. He can run. He gets separation. He's a good receiver. I mean, you saw that last year with Cousins. You've seen that at times with Penix. And he had missed a couple of games. And, man, did he come back big time. I think this is a winnable game. This is a big bounce-back spot for Indy, you know, after losing. And really a big kind of pressure spot for Daniel Jones after 5 turnovers. And, you know, these games internationally, they're weird. Sometimes the field conditions, I don't know what it'll be like. I think this game could go either way. I kind of like the Falcons to keep it close and for them to put on a show in Berlin with Atlanta's, you know, back very much to the wall now. I mean, if they're going to, you know, get back into the race in the NFC, they've got to win a game. They're 3-5. I could see this definitely being a down-to-the-wire game. Pressure spot for Daniel Jones. I was thinking about this too, Max. The trade, which says we're all in, you know, for Sauce Gardner, is also, you know, very much a support trade for Daniel Jones, meaning we believe in you. We don't need these first-round picks. We got our guy. You know, he only signed a 1-year deal, but they must feel like they can get him signed to a long-term deal. By the way, they should do it rather than him hitting the open market, you know, before the season ends or right after the season ends, before the open market begins. But, you know, Daniel Jones, when he's been faced with kind of some pressure and some expectations, hasn't done as well as when there were no expectations. Like this year, him coming into this year, no one had this working.
The epitome of under promise, over deliver.
Yeah, I mean, under promise, over deliver is, you know, a great way to kind of run everything. Yeah. Of course, this organization that we root for did it the opposite way for 2.5 decades. But I wonder if Daniel Jones is going to feel some pressure Sunday morning to play well off of that 5-turnover game against the Steelers, and how he'll handle the pressure of, we're all in on you, brother. We just traded 2 first-rounders for Sauce Gardner. We're going to go win the Super Bowl this year next behind you. Maybe it's easier for Jones when there's not a lot of expectations. I think this game's a close game. What's next?
Next up, we got a battle of the NFC South where the Saints make the trip up to Charlotte to take on the Panthers. Panthers coming off a massive win over Green Bay, and the Saints looking to snap a 4-game losing streak. Kickoff at 1 p.m. Head referee Brad Allen. Panthers currently favored by 5.5 points. Over under is 39.5. Kevin, do the Panthers continue their momentum after a big road victory, or can the Saints surprise some people in this spot?
I mean, the Saints just lost their big deep threat in Rashid Shaheed. They traded him away. This game, by the way, kind of reeks line-wise. I'll probably have the Saints in the smell test, so obviously I think it can be a close game. The Panthers are 5-0 against the number, against teams with losing records this year. So that worries me a little bit. I also think the Panthers are somewhat for real. You picked them in our midseason, modifications to make the postseason, or you certainly think they have a chance to make the postseason.
They got a shot, yeah.
They're really good in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
They're good up front on offense. They're good up front on defense. This feels like, after the big win last week over Green Bay at Lambeau, a bit of a letdown spot. Maybe they win, but maybe it's by a field goal. What's next?
Next up, we got the Giants hitting the road to take on Chicago. Another team coming off a big emotional win with how things ended versus the Bengals. On the other side, the Giants are still in search of their first win since beating the Eagles on Thursday Night Football. And if one doesn't come along soon, Brian Dable's seat might start heating up. Kickoff 1 p.m. Adrian Hill, the white hat for this one. Bears favored by 4.5 or 5, depending on where you get it. Over under 46.5. Ben Johnson versus Brian Dable. Kev, who you got in this one?
Ben Johnson versus Brian Dable.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that one of the surprising things about the Giants this year, now they've had obviously some injuries as well, is that they haven't been as good defensively as I thought they looked early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really a good run-stopping team. They pressure the quarterback fine, and Abdul Carter is right there right now for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But they're allowing 5.5 yards per carry in 3 straight games. You can't win when you don't have great offense giving up 5.5 yards per carry. And DeAndre Swift and company, including, number 25, the guy that hurt us that night against the Bears on Monday Night Football. I think the Bears, look, it's a big-time win. What an emotional win. The moment so far for Caleb Williams of his young career against the worst defense in football. Giants are still, they've got players on defense. I think this could be a close game, definitely. I think the Bears, they don't convince me. They don't have me convinced at 5-3. This comes down to a last-second play one way or the other. Jackson Dart's proven himself, but man, they've got to do better defensively up front against the run, which is a surprising thing because I thought early in the year the Giants were really good on defense. What's next?
Next up, we got 2 solid defenses coming to this one. One will leave victorious in a matchup between the C.J. Stroudless Texans and the Trevor Lawrence-led Jaguars. Big overtime win for the Jags, batting down Geno Smith at the line with final play. And the Texans suffered a heartbreaker in Houston versus the Broncos. Kickoff 1 p.m. Alex Moore, white hat for this one. Jags minus 1.5. Over-under is 37.5. You ready to watch some more Davis Mills snaps, Kev?
I actually don't mind Davis Mills. I think he can play a little bit. I know that overall his record's not very good as a starter, but I think he's good for that system. Yeah, this is tough for the Texans. They lost Stroud early in that game, and I think they were on their way to probably winning that game over Denver last week, which would have had them at 4-4, and I think a legitimate threat to make a playoff run, even a division run in the AFC South, because they still have both of their games against Indy left. But losing Stroud hurts. Look, Stroud, for all the talk of his sophomore slump season, it wasn't a bad season. He won a playoff game. They won a division. The offensive line was a mess. The offensive line this year has been a mess, but he's been solid. He's, his completion percentage is the best of his 3 years. He's was on pace before getting hurt for a 4,000-yard plus season, for, a season of like 25-10, something like that on touchdown to interception ratio. And they've been banged up. They haven't had Mixon, this year. They're only now, with him out of the game, they're only like a 1-point dog. I'd give them a chance. Look, the Texans are going to have a chance week in and week out because, my God, are they good on defense, especially up front, where they've got Will Anderson, one of the best in the game, and I think he's on the injury report this week, Danielle Hunter, Edwards, and then they've got guys like Stingley, in the secondary. They're well coached defensively, so they'll have a shot. But can Jacksonville, get back? I mean, the Jags are a mystery to me. Like, when they beat the Chiefs, I'm like, all right, here we go. A lot of people had them, as a surprise division winner this year. And then they go lose, to 2 good teams, back to back, as it turns out, Seattle and the Rams. I think the 2 best teams in the NFC. and then they barely beat Vegas in overtime. They've got to. This is a big game for Jacksonville. Big game for Jacksonville if they're going to be in the mix and if they're going to make a run for a spot. I don't really like a side in this one. I would take defense and home team if you forced me to take it, meaning Houston.
All right, down to Miami we go, where the Dolphins, they play host to the Bills in what feels like it should be a mini vacation for Josh Allen and his squad. Dolphin struggles have plagued them throughout the season. Last week in a loss to the Ravens, not the Raiders, where they were moving the ball but just couldn't score. Bills enter this one off a big-time win versus Mahomes and the Chiefs. Kickoff 1 p.m. Head referee Ron Torbert. Bills minus 9.5. Over-under is 49.5. Do the Bills continue to roll, Kev, or does Miami pull off a shocking upset?
So, we get Miami next week in Madrid. The Dolphins against the Ravens last Thursday night, that score was not really indicative of the game, especially in the first half, where the Dolphins moved the ball up and down the field against Baltimore's defense, which was pretty wretched that night. They just had self-inflicted mistakes, fumbles, penalties, etc. I think Miami's up for the task here off the long break. I think they've played better in recent games. They smoked Atlanta a few weeks ago. Now, Atlanta had Kirk in the game, didn't have Drake London, etc. And I think that they probably feel like they're playing better. They fired the GM, obviously. We saw that. Mike McDaniel's still in the fold. I thought he'd be gone by now. The Bills coming off that emotional win over Kansas City. They've had some struggles, on the road at Miami. I like the Dolphins plus the points here. Like them a lot, plus the points.
Yeah, and typically every time I say that a game should be a mini vacation for a team or should be an easy one, it never is.
There's no such thing.
Exactly.
Remember last year, the game, or was it 2 years ago? There was like just an epic game in the heat against the Dolphins. Between the Bills and the Dolphins.
Yeah, I do remember that. And then Bills were fanning themselves because it was like 90 degrees in the sun.
Yeah, they had guys basically keeling, borderline keeling over. Yeah. And they played later on in the postseason. They lost to the Dolphins that day, I think. Yeah, all right. I like the Dolphins to keep it close. What's next?
Next up, we got the Ravens heading over to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Big win for Minnesota last week, beating the Lions, where the defensive line for the Vikings was humming, generating a season high of 5 sacks. The Ravens are bottom 5 in the league in terms of quarterback sack percentage. A lot of those games were without Lamar, but the ranking is the ranking. Kickoff 1 p.m. Head referee Sean Hockley. Ravens favored by 4 points. Over-under is 49. And the Vikings get their defense rolling, or does Lamar come out in this one and have another strong performance?
Yeah, the strong performance was a little bit, dicey in the first half against Miami, but they didn't really have the ball as much in the first half. Yeah. That was a weird game. I don't think the Ravens defense is up to it. And I'm not sure about J.J. McCarthy either. It wasn't him last week as much as it was Minnesota's defense. This is a really big game for both teams. The Vikings with that win over Detroit got back to 4-4, and they've got the Ravens at home. The Ravens are 3-5. They thought they'd be even closer last week, but Pittsburgh went and beat Indy. So, if they're going to win this AFC North, they don't really have much, margin for error. They're favored by 4.5 on the road at Minnesota. I think Flores is as good as it gets, scheming it up. This is going to be one of those games I could see both teams really scoring. And I could see Minnesota trying to dominate time of possession by running the ball and keeping the ball on offense. Baltimore's defense, I know it's all injury related. I get it, Ravens fans. You guys have lost so much defensively with respect to injuries, starting with, interior, Matabuke, et cetera. And that has crushed your defense. But I think Minnesota can win this game outright at home. And I think that would be a devastating loss for Baltimore, especially if Pittsburgh goes and beats the Chargers on Sunday night. I like the Vikings plus the points here, and I think they could win the game outright.
All right. Next up, we got one of the biggest games of the 1 p.m. slate. 2 MVP candidates. This
is the game.
Yeah. Drake May and the Patriots take on Baker Mayfield and the Bucks. It's very weird calling those two guys MVP candidates, by the way. But New England enters this one off a narrow victory over the Falcons, and the Bucks well rested after their bye week. Kickoff 1 p.m. Head referee Alex Kemp. Bucks minus 2.5. Over-under is 48.5. Who comes out on top in this battle between two MVP candidates, Kev?
Yeah, I read this quote from it was Zion McCollum admitted that he told his brother, Raiders safety Tristan McCollum, about Drake May. I guess he was on the roster last year. He said, I didn't think he was going to be as good, but Tristan had been with the Eagles and they had a joint practice with the Patriots. And he said, yeah, we played him. He's special. He's a sleeper dual threat quarterback. He's really, really impressive. He throws the deep ball better than a lot of guys in this league, and he's very composed, and he can run. And we've seen it all from Drake May this year. This is a big spot for the Patriots. I know they went to Buffalo and won, and that was an impressive win on Sunday Night Football. Other than that, we've documented this. Everybody has. It's the weakest schedule. It'll ultimately be based on the teams they play the rest of the year. It'll be one of, if not the weakest schedules in NFL history. You know, they did beat the Bills, and that's the game they can hang their hat on. They went to Buffalo Sunday Night Football. Buffalo had 3 turnovers in the game. They had 12 penalties in the game. They kind of beat themselves up. They had, a lead in that game, but they ended up losing the game. And Drake May was outstanding in the second half. I thought last week, Drake May in this game last week against the Falcons where they were getting after him. They sacked him a bunch. There were turnovers in the game, and yet he just hung in there. Did the same thing against Cleveland after a rough first half. I think some of these games where he's taking a lot of sacks but battling through it are the most impressive things about him. And now he gets the best defensive coordinator that he'll face in Todd Bowles, off 2 weeks of being able to prepare with the Bucs having their bye week. This is a challenge, but I think the Patriots are up to it. They're very good on defense. I don't think we've talked a lot about how good defensively they are right now. But the Patriots can stop you. They can shut you down. This is the game of Sunday, early slate. Rams, 49ers late. You get a good Sunday night game, and obviously you got a really good Monday night game with Philly and Green Bay. But I'm looking forward to seeing this matchup between Todd Bowles and Tampa's defense against Josh McDaniel and Drake May. I like the Patriots. I think they're up to it, and I think they're going to prove a lot by going down to Tampa and winning this game outright. Want to take a break and come back?
Yeah. Well, actually, let's go through this last one real quick, just to tidy up the 1:00 slate. Should be quick because we're probably going to skip it anyway. The Browns travel west to take on the Jets, who just sold off everything with the exception of Breece Hall. This is almost certainly going to come into play at the end of the season when everyone's vying for the number 1 overall pick.
Do we really need to put everybody through this? Cleveland, New York?
I mean, listen, it's going to matter in April, not February. Who you got?
Okay. The Jets. Why not? They traded all their players away. Nobody thinks, they've played better and more competitively recently. I'll just take the Jets. Cleveland's terrible. We'll get back to around the NFL. I've got my smell test picks coming up. We've got predictions on Washington, Detroit on Sunday. Dan Quinn has stepped to the podium out in Ashburn. Let's listen to a little of the coach.
All that said, get ready to get rocking with you guys in the game.
Start with Jayden, just some good encouraging news for him. And what's the, I guess I was bringing up what's the plan, but what is the plan over the next several weeks? And, is there a chance that he could come back?
Well, let's start with just, I thought it was a good process to go through, like all the players do, get, second opinions and getting all the information, of what to do and how to do it. So I thought the guys nailed that. Dr. Nunziata ran point on that, but, consulting all the people, and Jayden was involved with that as well. So it's a good deal with no surgery. Obviously, that makes a big difference. When you have an injury, not to have to go down that road. I hope to give you guys an update after the bye week about where he is and, where we go from there. But after that, I'll give you an update on where it's at, and we'll give us a couple weeks to get to that space. That's where we're at.
And then when you look at Sunday, let's go to the corner position too. And with Mikey going inside, outside, wherever it goes,
Yep.
What did you see of him outside last year that if he has to go back out there is something you can build on?
Yeah. With him and Jonathan, going into the season, John, we kind of mixed back and forth, inside, outside. Both of them had the versatility to do that. We kind of landed on more outside for John, more inside for Mike, but then we kind of worked both of them. So,
all right, we'll break away from it. If he says anything else, we got what we wanted. Jayden Daniels, we talked about earlier, no surgery, no ligament damage, no IR. So all, major relief news as it relates to his dislocated elbow. And Quinn just told you, essentially he's out for the next 2 games for sure. He'll give everybody an update after the bye week. It's Detroit Sunday, next Sunday, Miami and Madrid, then the bye week. So when he comes back off the bye week with an update, it'll be the week of Thanksgiving. It'll be that Monday, November 24th, and that's when we'll have the next update. So 17 days away from will he or won't he talk, and the next game off that bye week is Denver on Thanksgiving weekend on Sunday Night Football. Would be interesting, right, if somehow, let's just say they got a split here, and they were 4-7. God forbid they won both of them and were 5-6. Then, of course, if that happens, we'll be having the conversation about why they got to 5-6 and did Marcus Mariota light it up? Because it's hard to imagine they could win 2 games over Detroit and then Miami. Miami, look, they're going to be an underdog against Miami, I would imagine. I haven't looked at the look-ahead line. I probably will. But as bad as Miami is right now, Washington, does not have much of a very strong rating with the odds makers as well. But, 17 days away. Monday, November 24th is the next update on Jayden and whether or not they will, start practicing him again. Or maybe we'll get in that particular week, he's going to need, we'll update you again next Monday. Who knows? Who knows on that? All right, let's finish up going around the NFL, then I'll get to my smell test picks here in about 10 minutes. Go ahead.
All right, next up, we got 2 NFC West matchups on tap in this one. More exciting division, one of the more exciting division races so far. First one, Cardinals head north to Seattle to take on the surging Seahawks. Arizona, the big win over Dallas on Monday Night Football, and a new old quarterback with Kyler Murray hitting the IR for 3 weeks into his foot rehab. The Seahawks are hitting the top of some people's power rankings and look like a very complete team. Kickoff 405, head referee Allen X. Seattle minus 6.5, over under 45 points. Can the Cardinals defense turn Sam Darnold into a pumpkin, or do the Seahawks continue their dominance?
Seattle's a better team now than they were earlier in the season when they needed a field goal at the gun to win Thursday Night Football against the Cardinals. We're at that point, by the way, of the NFL schedule, second half of the season. We're seeing now the second matchups within division teams. We've probably seen 1 or 2 of them already. Look, there's no doubt that I think the Cardinals people believe that they're better off with Jacoby Brissett than Kyler Murray right now. If you've seen any of the video of him, going through practice, it doesn't look like he's got a serious foot injury that should have shelved him on injured reserve. People are suggesting that is the case. Brissett gives him a better chance to win, point blank. And, Jonathan Gannon and that coaching staff recognize that. I think we saw last Sunday night one of the best teams in football. I really believe that. I think they and the Rams right now, Seahawks and the Rams, are the best teams in football. The Cardinals won a game on Monday night, short week on the road. Seattle coming back, after the impressive win last week. I think Seattle's, going to win this game. Can Jacoby Brissett keep it close? These division games, if you go through sort of the history of division games, the second game of the year is typically more times than not lower scoring and closer than anticipated. You just know each other that well. And circumstances, like in this case, Seattle feeling really good about themselves. Arizona getting a little bit of a boost, but having a quarterback playing now as the named starter. We'll see. Would it shock me if Arizona hangs in there and keeps it close? They did it on the road against Indy a few weeks ago. They did it against the Packers a few weeks ago. They beat the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. Jacoby Brissett's given them a chance to be competitive. It's not a terrible, terrible roster. The Cardinals roster isn't. Might be closer than people think. What's next?
Defense is pretty good, too. Next up, we got a rivalry that I look forward to every year, and we just saw it a few weeks ago. Went to overtime at the beginning of October. Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay bring their squads in Levi Stadium for the second NFC West throwdown of the day. The Rams are another team that'll look dominant all season with a top 10 pass rush and an offense that does not like to turn the ball over. On the other side, the Niners have had an injury-plagued year, but are still maintaining their competitiveness. Kickoff 425, head referee Land Clark. Rams minus 4.5, over under 49.5. Which coach gets his team the win in this week, Kev?
Kyle Shanahan has kind of owned Sean McVay in their head-to-head. The game in week 5 on Thursday Night Football, which San Francisco won in overtime. They got that 4th down stop in overtime. What a hell of a football game that was. I remember feeling like, wow, that felt like a playoff game. That was the 8th game, including the playoffs, between McVay and Kyle Shanahan, decided by 3 or fewer points, which is tied for the 3rd most for any NFL coaching matchup in NFL history. So even though Kyle's gotten the better of Sean McVay, these games always come down to the wire. And this is a big game. How about the Rams and the respect they are getting from the odds makers on the road? 4.5-point favorites against the Niners. Look, the Niners are getting great play from Mac Jones. Christian McCaffrey's been healthy. George Kittle's back. They're going to get healthier, perhaps at wide receiver in the next few weeks. This is a great job by Kyle Shanahan, the job he's doing. Phenomenal job. Last year couldn't overcome a lot more in the way of injuries, but defensively, to lose Bosa and Warner and still kind of hang in there. They gave up a bunch of points against the Giants, but they were able to score 34, on New York. They got drummed by the Texans. This is a hell of a football game. Too bad our game's going on simultaneously with it. But big game for both teams in what is right now just a loaded division with 6-2, 6-2, 6-3 in the top 3 with the Seattle Seahawks, LA Rams, and San Francisco 49ers. All right, we going to Sunday night?
Yep, last one. We got Sunday Night Football between the Chargers and Steelers. 2 potential playoff candidates in this one. Steelers enter off a big win against Indy, and the Chargers escape with the win over the Titans despite a few mental errors from Justin Herbert and the Chargers special teams unit. Kickoff at 8:30. Head referee Brad Rogers. Live line currently Chargers -3. Over under is 45 points. Do the Steelers continue to coach their way to victory, or can the Chargers clean it up and get the win?
Apparently last week against the Colts, the Steelers, we always hear that when the defense is struggling, it's like they got to simplify things. They got to keep things simple. Well, apparently they really did. They went down to like 3 or 4 kind of things that they were going to do and focus on. And they forced 5 turnovers, and they were forced. TJ Watt was, uncheckable. Joe Alt's not in this game for the Chargers. We saw what no Joe Alt, no, Slater. Slater's been out the whole year, what it looked like against a bad defense, our defense. I mean, Washington's defense got after it against the Chargers in that banged up offensive line. This could be another opportunity as Alt's out again for the Steelers to take another step forward defensively. Look, they've played, well enough on offense. This is, an Aaron Rodgers season right now. He's playing smart football. They are playing complementary football, like they did last week. And in some of their wins, they've had to overcome the bad defense, but they've gotten a couple of breaks, special teams breaks. They also had a special teams catastrophe earlier in the season that cost them a game against Seattle. I read something recently that blew me away. Mike Tomlin, as an underdog, as a head coach, 63-36-3. That is right there, 63% as an underdog. As a dog, you don't want to be an underdog, a favorite against Mike Tomlin's teams. I think the Steelers win this game outright. I think part of it is because the Chargers are so banged up in the offensive line. I think the Steelers are going to end up winning this division. Baltimore they're going to have to win a lot of games to get to the point where those two against Pittsburgh matter. Because if Pittsburgh gets through this one, Max, remember they had this stretch of Packers, Colts, Chargers, right? And they win 2 out of those 3. Then they get Bengals, Bears. I'm not saying the Bears are a pushover. Before they do play Buffalo, and then you get, the 2 with the Ravens over the final 5 weeks of the season. Big game. Pittsburgh's got to stay ahead. Like, I could see a Pittsburgh win following a Baltimore loss in Minnesota, and all of a sudden, those odds will shift if they're 6-3 and Baltimore's 3-6, if they've got a 3-game lead. I like Pittsburgh Sunday night. All right, want to get to the smell test?
Let's do it.
All right, do it. From Jackson, Jackson writes, stop telling us there's going to be a market correction. You're scaring people off of your sizzling picks. Yeah, I have felt like the last couple of weeks, and I feel it again this week. I'm sorry. I'm suspicious, suspicious and superstitious about, crowing too much about this run that I'm on. 9-1 last week, 70, 41, and 6 for the year, 63%. I've had great years. I've been doing this, most of for, this is year 20. I've had 14 winning seasons out of the 19, just 5 losing seasons. But most of the winning seasons have been at, 54%, 53%, enough to win money on, because you got to be at like 52.6 if you're paying, minus 110 on a loss and you're betting the same amount, on every game. 64% one year. I've had a couple of 60 pluses, but mostly they've been in the low to mid 50s, over the course of the year. And it's just kind of what it is if you're really good at this. Like, if you're really good at this after 17, 18 weeks of college and pro picks, and you're at 54, 55%, that's excellent. 63% through 10 weeks is insane. I feel good about it. I feel good about the smell test this weekend, even though I'm going to say there should be some sort of correction coming. I have not had a record-wise losing week at all this season. I've had 2 500 weeks. Yes, I get it. 500 weeks, you lose money. I understand how that works. Trust me. I'm very familiar with juice, very familiar with the VIG. By the way, don't pay high VIGs, people. It's crazy. Search, find. You can find minus 110s. You can find less than that on occasion. All right. We're kicking it off early tonight. I strongly suggested that you play the Raiders in the under last night. I gave it out as my, strong lean. I liked the Raiders last night. I didn't give it out. I had some info that a very sharp bettor that, bets with a lot of the offshore guys had size on Denver. So you saw that line. There were a lot of sharps on the Raiders. I should have given it out. I didn't. That's happened a few times this year, but it's happened also where I didn't give games out where I would have lost big. But I did lean Raiders under. I also leaned UTSA. That was not close. But I also leaned Georgia Southern, and they won outright last night. So it would have been a 3-1 night had I played everything, but I didn't. So let's get started with tonight. In college football, Tulane is at Memphis. This is a very big game in that league. It's a very big game in sort of the non-power 5. South Florida's win last night was big in that last playoff spot. Tulane last week got run by UTSA 48-26. So they're coming off a loss, and Memphis is on this roll, which includes that comeback win over USF a few weeks ago. By the way, a week after they had lost to Mortenson's son's team, UAB, Memphis is a short favorite in this game right now at home, laying 3.5. The public really likes Memphis to win this game, especially since Tulane got rocked last week. And this line's come down from 4.5. There's sharp money on Tulane. So the first wager is tonight, 9 o'clock kick, Tulane on the road plus 3.5. Let's go to Saturday. I've been on the right side of West Virginia games kind of all year long. I don't know why. I had them against Pitt earlier in the year. Remember, as a 7-point dog, they won outright. And then the next week, they were a big dog against Kansas. I had Kansas, and they got rocked. And then I gave them out last week. I couldn't believe that Houston was less than a 2-touchdown favorite, and West Virginia won outright. I didn't expect that. Not only did they win outright, they went outright easily on the road against Houston. Now they're home against a Colorado team that has gotten smoked 2 weeks in a row by Utah and Arizona. And somehow Deion's team is only catching 6.5. It's short. The public likes the favorite in this game. I can't buy the half point because there are more 6s out there than there are 6.5s, and there are no 7s. So I'll just take Colorado plus the best number on the board, plus the 6.5. One of the biggest public plays of the weekend, and why not? I mean, nobody can score against Ohio State. I mean, Penn State did last week. Was a game score-wise. You never felt like it was going to be a game. But, they've got, 7 games this year in which teams have scored less than 10 points. And they've got Purdue, and they're laying 29.5 on the road. Purdue's struggled to score, although they played pretty well against Michigan last week. They actually were in that game. Michigan's just doing enough to kind of win. I'll just take Purdue on the general principle of nobody's on them, and every bookmaker everywhere will need the underdog in that particular game. All right, here's a game that I just love beyond just the contrarian feel of it. I actually legitimately think that Oregon is going to lose at Kinnick on Saturday against Iowa. That line is bouncing around right now. There are 6s. There are 6.5s out there. I'm going to take Iowa plus the 6.5. I mean, there are too many 6s and 6.5s for me to feel great about buying the half point on that one. Because you guys are going to end up with it at 6.5. I don't know if it goes to 7, maybe. I'd love to take it plus 7, but I'll take Iowa plus 6.5. I think this is a really tough spot for Oregon on the road. They haven't played great. The quarterback hasn't played great. And there's one result this year that I think is the most impressive losing result of the season. And that was Iowa's loss to Indiana. Indiana has blown everybody out except Iowa on the road. Iowa took a 13-10 lead into the final 10 minutes of that game. They lost 20-15. Iowa can score this year. They haven't been able to score. Iowa plus the 6.5. This one's painful. I was against Vandy last week. And I think the shine is off Vanderbilt to a certain degree. It's painful because Auburn cannot score. And I've been on the right side of Auburn, and I've been on the wrong side of Auburn this year. Vandy's laying right now 6.5 and 7. So I'll take Auburn +7 on the road at Vandy. This is one of those, I hate taking teams, even when they are major anti-public sides, when they struggle to score. They only scored 3 last week against Kentucky. Vandy, obviously, I gave out Texas. I didn't give out Texas last week. I just told you that I liked Texas last week. And by the way, that would have pushed or lost because that number went to 3.5. I'm going to give out Auburn and take the 7 at Vandy. They're good defensively. And then, like Iowa, I love this game beyond just the number. Wake Forest got blown out last week by Florida State, who's obviously struggled this year since the early portion of the season. Meantime, Virginia is rolling. They're 14th in the latest, college football playoff rankings. They got a shot. They're on top of the ACC. The ACC's had a bunch of upsets recently, and I think this is the next one. I think Wake's got a chance to win this game outright. Virginia's won, 7 in a row, but there have been some close calls against some bad teams like Washington State, like Carolina, who's played better. They won that game in overtime. The Cal game last week was actually much closer than the score indicated. They had a pick 6 at the end to win by 10. How is Wake Forest, after losing 42-7 on the road in Tallahassee, how are they getting just 6.5 points? I will buy the half point. There are some 7s out there. I see some 7s, so I feel fine taking Wake plus the 7. All right, let's go to Sunday. A lot of games on Sunday that I like. Let's start with the game in Berlin. Indy's a major public favorite bounce back game, so I'll take Atlanta plus the 6 in the Berlin game at Indy. Buffalo is one of the biggest public plays on the board after they beat Kansas City last week. I'll take the Dolphins plus the 9.5. People love Baltimore this week. Even though Minnesota won last week, there's a lot of Baltimore money and public money, sharp money on Minnesota. I'll take the Vikings at home plus the 4. Already told you that Carolina is a huge public favorite this week. I'll take the Saints plus 5.5. I will also take Washington plus 8 at home. That line keeps coming down. I don't know where it's going to end up. It was at 9.5 or at 8. There's some 7.5s out there. I'll take Washington plus 8. And then Monday night, Green Bay favored against the Eagles coming off their bye, and the Packers coming off that hideous loss to Carolina. Yeah, the public money's on Philadelphia, the sharp money all over the Packers in this game. I have no idea why, because I think the loss of Tucker Kraft is a massive loss, but I don't think about these things that way. I'll take the side that most books will need on Monday night. I'll take the Packers and lay their 2s out there and 2.5s. I'll lay the 2 on that one. Yeah, I'm crossing Arizona off. I thought I was going to give you Arizona as well. All right, let's go through it. Tulane plus 3.5 tonight against Memphis. Tomorrow, Colorado plus 6.5. Purdue plus 29.5. Iowa plus 6.5. Auburn plus 7. Wake Forest plus 7. Sunday, Atlanta plus 6 in the Berlin game. Miami plus 9.5. The Vikings plus 4. The Saints plus 5.5. Washington plus 8. They are the biggest anti-public play on the card all weekend long, college or pro. And then on Monday night, the Packers minus the 2. We'll tweet these picks out from the Team 980 later today, so you can have them written down somewhere. We'll come back. We will have predictions. Skins, Lions, Sunday. Is anybody crazy enough to pick Washington to win outright? And we'll open up phone lines at 301-230-0980. If I told you that fast forwarding to Monday's show, Washington won the game, how did they do it? Your answers can be creative if you would like. But if they win the game, how did they pull it off? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. All of our NFL talk presented by Paramount Plus, streaming November 16th on Paramount Plus. It's the return of Landman. This is a great show from Taylor Sheridan, co-creator of Yellowstone, Academy Award winner Billy Bob Thornton is back, and he is at his best. It also features Academy Award nominees Demi Moore, Andy Garcia, and Sam Elliott. Landman, new season, streaming November 16th, only on Paramount Plus. All right. If I told you that I've seen the future and I'm looking at Monday's show and we're talking about an upset, a shocker, how did they pull it off? If you want to weigh in, 301-230-0980. I've already given you Washington out as a smell test pick. By the way, I failed to remind everybody that I am 62.5% lifetime on all smell test picks involving Washington, either picking against or picking with. I like them plus the 8. My final score prediction is 23-20 Detroit. If they pull it off, no comedy here, no attempt at comedy here. They pull it off because Detroit completely, soils themselves. 10 penalties, 3 turnovers, and Washington hangs in there and wins a close game. We saw last week a 10-point dog Tennessee almost beat the Chargers, a 14-point underdog Carolina win at Lambeau, a 9.5-point underdog win against the Lions in Detroit. It happens all the time in the NFL. Big underdogs win. They win outright. So it would not be the craziest thing in the history of football watching if it happened. But given how banged up this team is and how poor they have played the last 3 weeks, it certainly seems like it would be one of the shockers of the year. I do have Washington losing, but 23-20. If they were to pull it off, it will have more to do with Detroit than it will our team. Max, what's your final score prediction?
My final score prediction is going to be Lions 45, Commanders 31. My footnote is Amon-Ra 3 touchdowns.
3 touchdowns for Amon-Ra.
Yeah, I think
that's the opposite score, with same score,
yes,
but opposite winner for the playoff game.
Yep.
Let's go to Paulie. Paulie, final score, and if they pull it off, how did they do it?
I got 31-30, the good guys, man. They pull it off by slowing the game down to speed the game up.
You've been saying that for a month now. Have they been able to do it?
Man, they ain't attempted to do it. So, listen, man, we got an ass kick on Monday night. They got to come out with some pride. They got to come out with a different scheme, offense and defense. Slow the game down to speed it up, and they need the blitz golf, man. He's not a mobile guy. You got to get the golf calls for turnovers. I got Marcus Mariota, 2 touchdown passes, 1 rushing touchdown. Chris Rodriguez over 100 yards in the touchdown, man. Hey, listen, you got to feed Vlade and then let Glenn Rice go to work.
Yeah, well, Glenn, I mean, no limit to his range. Hopefully we can find somebody that has no limit to theirs. Kevin in Arlington. Kevin, if I told you they did it, how did they do it?
Well, they did it by getting that big boost of confidence that they're going to get their quarterback in December, and it's just an emotional lift for the team. But on the field, to win 24-23, it's going to take 3 things. It's going to take Chris Rodriguez going off 100-plus yard game. It's going to take Jayden Lane killing it in the kicking game, which he's failed to do the last 2 weeks. And it's going to require Mariota playing within himself, being a key part of the running game and not turning the ball over. That's the only way I see us winning this game.
Look, if Jayden Lane's going to do it in the kicking game, I hope it's as a punt returner and not a kickoff returner, because we don't want too many kickoffs by the other team. We'd like more punts, because that hasn't been the case. We've been fielding a lot of kickoff returns, not enough punt returns in recent games. Thanks, Kev. Appreciate it. All right, we're done. Chris is next. Back on Monday.